What's going on, y'all? Welcome in. Boiler in Texas here, and we're doing something new this year. I promised you all and myself that this year we'd be doing a little bit more content when it comes to Purdue sports. I've gotten a little lackadaisical with just posting on Twitter about Purdue sports and the results and getting into all sorts of banner online, but I've been wanting to do more, and I think this is the perfect time to do it. And it's all starting off with Purdue football. I mean, I think that's pretty much why we're all here. Purdue went out and had their first game of the season last weekend against Fresno State, and this upcoming Saturday we head on the road to Blacksburg, Virginia to talk about Virginia Tech. Since this is the first one of these I'm going to doing, we're going to figure it out as we go, but for this first one, I'm kind of thinking of breaking it up as talking about Fresno State, then we'll talk about Virginia Tech, and then I kind of do want to take a look around the Big Ten as well and see if there were any notable results from the previous week that's worth talking about. But let's go ahead and let's start off with Fresno State. Purdue ends up taking on a top 25 and 10 win team from a season ago in the season opener. Sure could have used a bit of an easier game in this one, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and Purdue ends up falling on their season opener at home 39-35 against the Fresno State Bulldogs in a very up and down, very exciting, and very we'll use the term frustrating game to open the Ryan Walters era at Purdue. When it comes to covering games, I think we'll probably split it up in terms of the passing game, rushing game, defense, and then I do also want to kind of, just because they seem to have given us a reason to, kind of talk about the coaching decisions and the sidelines as well. So let's just go ahead and jump straight in and just talk about some stats. Hudson Card makes his Purdue debut in this one, going 17 for 30 for 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, with a long of what was the Deion Burks touchdown, 70 something odd yards. And I think this game really showed the potential that Hudson Card has, obviously playing behind an offensive line that definitely, we'll just use the term, could use some work. He definitely had moments of brilliance, and he had moments where you could tell that he left a little bit out there, and I'm sure that's quite frustrating for him as well as the coaching staff. But I think as Hudson Card gets more used to game speed, more used to this offensive line, and more used to playing in this system, I think we'll see him shine. And you can see that occasionally out there. We just would like to see it on a bit more of a consistent basis. Taking a look at the rushing stats for Purdue, Devin Mockabee leads the way with 16 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. Tyrone Tracy also got in on the action with a touchdown on his own. Not so much in terms of rushing yards, but he did punch one in as well. And Purdue does cross 100 yards rushing as a team. I think I was kind of expecting more to come from the running game this season, or at least in this game for sure. We'll cover it, and we all know what we're going to cover when we get down to the coaching decisions, but there were some frustrating moments in the running game that I think we all could have used a little more something when it comes to the rushing game, and we could have I know I would have liked to see more from Devin Mockabee in this one, but I think we'll see more from him as the season goes on, especially this weekend as Purdue heads on the road. In the receiving game, obviously, we have to start with Deion Burks having his breakout moment in the season opener, taking what I believe was the third play of the game, 80 yards to the house, in a very, very exciting run where he broke, I think it was about 4 or 5 tackles on his road, paving the way towards the end zone. It was a very, very good game for Deion Burks, obviously only ending up with 4 receptions. We'd kind of like to see those numbers go up a little bit, but at the same time, I'm glad to see that Hudson Card was sort of spreading the ball around. Deion Burks led the team with Abdur-Rahman Yassin in terms of total receptions at 4. Yassin ended up with 4 for 46. And then there were, let me see if I can do the math here, 4 other receivers who also caught passes. So a total of 6 receivers caught passes in this one. And so I'm glad to see that we were able to spread the ball around a little bit. But it'd be nice to see a little more consistent production from the receiving game at the same time. Let's see, let's go ahead and talk about the defense, which I believe is probably one of the hotter topics of this game that came out of this game in terms specifically of the passing defense was rough. We'll use the term rough. We'll use the term room for improvement. It could have definitely been a lot better. There were definitely moments where they shined, but there were also some moments where it was very pulling your hair out, frustrating as well. It's definitely not the way I'm sure that this Ryan Walters led team was hoping to start the season on defense. But you know what? You have to play with the players you have, and I'm hoping that this coaching staff will be able to learn these guys up a little bit, get them to playing a little bit more consistently in the secondary, and sort of playing around our probably defensive player of the game for on Purdue's side, arguable, at least the player of the game in the secondary, true freshman Dylan Thieneman. As we've always said, always trust the Thieneman. I think a lot of questions were asked when it was announced that Thieneman would be starting as a true freshman, and arguably one of the most important defensive positions there as a safety. But I think he played the part beautifully. He ended up with an interception and a couple of really big hits as well. Definitely did not look too scared in the moment, saving some long plays as well. So I'm excited to see him continue to develop and see what he looks like as the season goes on, as well as further in his career in West Lafayette. Other than them, we can talk about the defensive line, which I think actually was one of the brighter spots of the day for the Boilers. We had Kydron Jenkins and Nick Scourton obviously up front. I think they caused a lot of damage up front, getting to the quarterback early in the game. Obviously, they started to wear down towards the end of the game, but I think at the same time, they weren't necessarily being rewarded as much due to the lapses in the secondary. But I think those are a pair that I'm excited to see continue on in their careers as well as this season. I think they showed a lot on the way in this one, and I'm excited to see what they can do against some other competition as well. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here on defense? Not a whole lot in terms of anything else really on defense. I think there's just overall, I think the message for the defense is just, use this as a learning opportunity. I mean, Purdue put up points in buckets, but the problem is they gave it up just as much. Giving up 39 at home is definitely not the way you want to start the season. But of course, if you're putting up 35, it doesn't look as bad. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Purdue walks out of their first week game with an L, and that is definitely a tough one for sure. Let's also talk about special teams, because I think this is a bright spot in this one. While other moments weren't necessarily looking the best, I think special teams returns especially looked very, very good. We saw a kick return touchdown by Tyrone Tracy Jr. I believe I saw it was the first since 2013 against Penn State. It's been almost a decade since we've had a special teams touchdown and kickoff return touchdown. I actually am one of the people who missed it, even though I was watching from home. I was off taking care of some stuff and on my way back down, and by the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, Purdue had already scored and kicked off, and so I was very surprised to see that, but it was a welcome sight to see some success in the kick return game. There was also a punt return that actually went for about 30 yards by TJ Sheffield that set up one, I believe it was Purdue's second touchdown drive, and so it is very, very nice to see a coaching staff willing to let their players take some chances on kick returns and try and set us up in the future with some good field position. I'm definitely not going to complain about us starting with better field position if we can help it. Elsewhere, not a whole lot in terms of the other side of special teams for Purdue. Ben Friel went 0 of 1 with a 0 of 1 from field goals. I believe it was about a 43-yarder or something like that he ended up just missing a little too wide. I believe it was left. It's been a minute since I've seen that, and he ended up going 5 for 5 on extra points, which at the end of the day is the ones you need to be automatic more than anything. And then Jack Ansel, 4 punts for 166 yards, 41.5 average, 2 inside the 20. Definitely nothing to complain about there. So let's talk about what this game meant and kind of the overall points. I put this on Twitter, and I'm going to do my best to remember them. I probably should have pulled it up before this, but we live and we learn. There were definitely some pros in this one. I think Hudson Card definitely showed flashes of being the quarterback we were all hearing about when it comes to coming out of camp. The downside that goes along with that is that Purdue was playing with, I believe, their third or fourth string center in this one, and so the offensive line definitely looked a little shaky in terms of getting push and protection in the pocket, and I think that definitely caused some issues for Card working and being comfortable in the pocket and doing through his reads and finding the right receiver. But at the same time, he made some really nice throws. He had a deep ball to Deion Burks there towards the end of the game that set up Purdue very nicely, I believe, on their final scoring drive. And so he definitely showed flashes of being able to do what we all assumed he was going to do. And I'm excited to see what he can do in the future in the next few games as well. The other good point I already brought up earlier is the receiving core. We saw a breadth of receivers make some good plays and make some good grabs, and I'm excited to see what this group can do. I think at this point it's pretty obvious that it might be led by Deion Burks. He seemed poised and ready to make a play early and often, and we saw it here when he ends up going for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. And so I'm excited to see what he can do going forward as well. Again, we'll just go right back to the other side. I really need to see some improvement from this defensive secondary on the Broilers side of the ball. I could belabor on for a long time about the mental lapses that we saw coming out of the secondary, but I think the best thing we can do is kind of just mentally move on from that and hope that they'll come out and a little more focused and a little more prepared this next weekend, as they hopefully don't get caught out quite as much as they did in this one. Although I will also give a lot of credit to Fresno State. They actually schemed up a lot of favorable matchups for them that ended up working out perfectly. They had some play calls that put our secondary in some tough positions, and they decided to try and make a play, and it just ended up being the wrong one. So I can't fault our side just too much. Fresno State, I mean, what can I say? They boiled up a beautiful game plan and they executed it when they need to, and they got to walk out with a win. And then for my last point, and I'll use this to transition into my final thing I want to talk about in this game, is the coaching decisions from the sideline. I think the biggest gripe that a lot of us have in this one was the insistence in trying to run it right up the gut with an offensive line that was clearly not getting the push necessary. I don't know how many times we saw, even in a row, a hand up the middle to either Devin Maccabee or to Dylan Downing or even Tyrone Tracy, trying to go between the tackles and it just not working, getting stuff for 0 or 1 yards. And the lack of creativity in the running game really frustrated me, and I'm sure it frustrated, from what I saw on Twitter, frustrated a lot of people online as well. Something I need to see going into Virginia Tech is a little more creativity, especially with a banged up offensive line. And now there are rumors that we might be getting one of Purdue's offensive linemen back, Colton Bringer, sorry. And so we might be a little bit more shored up on the offensive line going into this weekend, but at the same time, we need to see something else. We saw last year a lot of what Devin Maccabee could do when you get him in space on the edge. I would love to see more of that going forward. At the same time, I think we saw some decent things from Tyrone Tracy coming out of the backfield. I would love to see him use a bit more as a receiver out of the backfield, but you know, you win some, you lose some. In terms of the head coach, I've seen a lot of discourse online about Ryan Walters and the mistakes that he made going through this game. And while I can't necessarily take all the blame off of him, obviously the lack of preparation and decision making in the secondary does kind of fall on them at some degree, but at the same time, his defenses are always predicated on, you know, man-to-man coverage, trying to make a play and forcing the offense into making a tough decision. And you know what? Fresno State handled it beautifully. Their quarterback threw for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns, and only threw the one pick that I mentioned earlier that was picked off by Thieneman. And so obviously, I saw a lot of people checked out on this, apparently already checked out on this Purdue team after one game. Well, at this point, I mean, we all knew this season was going to be tough. I think a lot of us, including myself, were hopefully predicting, with one of the hardest schedules in the country, predicting a bowl game in Ryan Walters' first season. At this point, I think this is all about, you know, growing his culture, getting his systems installed, and trying to do the good things and build on a foundation for years to come. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. That's a bit of a hot topic, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know down below. But let's go ahead. Let's actually take a look forward to next weekend, this Saturday against Virginia Tech on the road. The first true road game for Ryan Walters, and we head to Blacksburg, Virginia to take on the Hokies, who in their first week matchup played against Old Dominion at home. They end up winning that game 36-17. Their starting quarterback, Grant Wells, threw for 17 of 29 for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. In terms of rushing, this actually surprised me. They had the same number of rushing yards that Purdue did, and there's 109 as a team, with their leading rusher going for 19 carries and 55 yards. So definitely a running back by committee for them, as they had, 5 people record rushing attempts and only going for 109 yards on 43 total attempts. Definitely not the most inspiring. Most of Virginia Tech's offense came in the form of receiving. They really did a receiving by committee here, as they had, 10-ish, 9 or 10 receivers catch balls and recording 3 total touchdowns. Obviously about 260 yards on 18 catches. Obviously it is against Old Dominion, so you have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, but you know what, they went out and took care of business. On the defensive side, they actually had a lot of takeaways. I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly, Old Dominion had 3 total fumbles, which they lost 2, and 1 interception on their turnover margin as well. So they ended up having 3 total turnovers, including an extra fumble that they managed to recover. And so they definitely did themselves no favors in this one. But at the same time, Virginia Tech took care of business and pulled away in this one pretty early, actually. In the first half, they had a pretty hefty lead, and they only led. Look at me, I'm reading at the same time I'm talking, if you can't tell. They went into halftime up 16-10, so definitely not too confidence inspiring, and they ended up scoring 20 in the second half to pull away and win by the 19 they ended up. So it's going to be interesting. I think the biggest thing that Purdue might have going for them in this one is that it is a noon game, and so it'll be nice and early. It's definitely not going to be able to take advantage. They're not going to be able to take advantage of the night game atmosphere, and we'll be interested to see what kind of crowd they could draw. I mean, obviously it's a Power 5 matchup in the non-conference, which I'm sure will draw plenty, but having it as a noon game rather than night game, I think definitely helps us more than it hurts us. I'm excited to see what we can do this weekend. I think one of the biggest things we need to see is that the defensive secondary staying, in front of receivers, as well as hopefully generating some more pressure on the quarterback. I think we did a very, very good job, but the problem is we just ran out of it late, and Fresno State was able to make the plays they needed. So we're going to have to do our best to, continue to put our opposing offenses in tough spots and make them make plays. And if they do that, then good on them. In terms of when Purdue has the ball, I definitely want to see more creativity in the running game. Looking at this, Old Dominion ran for 201 yards, which is... I don't think anyone would complain about that. They had a guy go for 81 on his own, 73, 34. And so there definitely is opportunity here to take advantage of a Virginia Tech run defense that does not look the strongest. But at the same time, they only gave up 94 yards receiving. Now, granted, Purdue's receiving core is going to be probably a little bit better, a little bit more skilled than Old Dominion's. So we're going to have to keep that in mind as we move forward as well. But I think this is a great opportunity to work on the run game, try and get this offensive line to gel a little bit more, and then take advantage of the passing game when it opens up. I'd love to see Hudson Card use his legs a little bit more. But at the same time, I also fully understand that he really is Purdue's only quarterback, and if he does get hurt, then that's more hurt than helps at this point. So I think I would love to see him be more opportunistic with his legs, but also still safe, not necessarily taking any big shots or any risks, but using his legs to keep the defense honest. I'd love to see a little bit more. But I think it's going to be a fun one. Being a true road game, you never really know what's going to happen. I think this could be one of the better games of the weekend in terms of non-conference. Obviously, there's some very big games going on this weekend, but I think this could be a very intriguing game, as Virginia Tech has not necessarily been one of the strongest teams in football as of late, but also Purdue obviously has issues and things to cover on themselves. So it's going to be a fascinating game to watch. I'm excited to see it, but we'll have to see more about that as we come. As long as I see an improvement and we look competitive, I'm going to be happy. While it might be frustrating if Purdue loses another close game, just seeing good things is all I really want to see this year, and I want to see this team set up for years to come. I mentioned this on Twitter as well over the week, as a lot of people were expressing their frustrations over the loss. Purdue has a top 30 recruiting class coming in next season, and I think there's only room to add to that. I'm excited to see what this program can look like as this coaching staff and these players get used to each other, and we can move forward and try and build a program together. But let's go ahead now. Let's take a look around the rest of the Big Ten games of the first week. And I think there's only really a couple here worth mentioning. Obviously, Minnesota and Nebraska started us off on Thursday with an absolute Big Ten West classic as Minnesota comes back and wins 13-10 at the death in the fourth quarter. I think it was, it was 10-7 with, I believe, like 4 minutes left or something like that. No, it was 10-3 with like 4 minutes left, and Minnesota ends up getting a couple of key takeaways and ends up coming down, tying the game on probably one of the craziest catches I've seen in a very long time by their, I can't remember his first name, but last name Jackson, keeping that his 1 foot up and toe tapping the grass in the end zone for one of the best touchdowns I've seen in college football. And then obviously they get the ball back once again and then seal it with a field goal at the death to take down Nebraska. It seems like you can take Scott Frost out of Nebraska, but you can't really take the Scott Frost out of Nebraska. Nebraska heads to Colorado this weekend, which is going to be probably one of the more watched games of the weekend. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I know I will be watching it for sure. Let's see, taking a look around everywhere else. Ohio State looked fairly pedestrian against Indiana, only winning 23-3. Penn State kind of dominated West Virginia pretty much the whole way. And the night game on Saturday, that one was pretty uneventful, to be honest. Wisconsin kind of struggled with Buffalo for the first half before kind of running away with it towards the end of the game. So their game against Washington State this weekend is going to be very, very interesting. I'm going to save Utah, Iowa for last because I find that one hilarious. Maryland takes down Towson 38-6. Not a whole lot really to talk about there too much. Illinois survives, and I will use the term survives liberally here. Survives a bid from Toledo, I believe, taking a field goal with less than a minute remaining to take down the Rockets in their season opener. They looked very odd. It was one of those classic, small team battling a Big Ten team, and Big Ten team just survives. It was kind of interesting to keep tabs on. Northwestern Rutgers was interesting just from a pure Northwestern sense. Rutgers dominated that one from the jump, and it wasn't until a garbage time touchdown that Northwestern even got on the board. But I think one of the more fascinating games to watch in the first week was Iowa-Utah State. Iowa came out of this one on fire, scoring 14 points in the first quarter, and I think a lot of us got a little worried that Iowa was going to surpass that 25 points per game mark in this first game handily before the forensics remember that this is Iowa and they don't run up the score on anyone and don't let them tell anybody otherwise. They ended up going up at the half 17-3 before only scoring a fourth quarter touchdown the rest of the way while giving up 11 points to only win by 10 and actually scored 24 of their 25 total points needed, or I guess I should say Brian Ferentz needed on their way. It's going to be fascinating. A lot of accounts that I've seen have points trackers that they seem to see if Brian Ferentz can save his job in Iowa as the offensive coordinator. It'll be fascinating to see. Obviously they take on Iowa State this weekend, but that's kind of what I saw around the Big Ten. What did you guys think of the Big Ten slate in week 1? Let me know down in the comments below. And which games are you looking forward to the most in week 2? But I think that'll actually wrap it up for me here. I know this ran a little long and it got a little long-winded, but like I said, this is something new I want to do this season, and we're going to figure out the flow and kind of get it smoothed out as we continue on. But I appreciate you guys coming in and saying what's up, and I will see you guys online for the game against Virginia Tech, as well as right here after the game is over for another one of these, and then we will talk about Syracuse and Purdue's final non-conference game of the season. But until then, boiler up, hammer down, hail Purdue, and I'll see you guys in the next one.